So 5 artists to check out if you like Kendrick Lamar. There's going to be timestamps in the description so you can navigate through this video that way if you'd like. So Kendrick Lamar is a big deal. He's going to be at the Super Bowl halftime. He just did well at the Grammys. He's been like the top rap artist for years. I've only really listened to Kendrick Lamar recently. Initially, when I listened to him, I didn't really get it. And then I did. He's awesome. So in listening to him the past couple years, knowing his music, thinking about artists that I would also associate with what he does in a rock style, things about what he does that remind me of other rock bands. Talk about 5 of those and why I think maybe they're related. And if you like Kendrick Lamar, maybe you'll like these guys. So Brand New. This is a band from the early 2000s. This is an emo band. And if you think Kendrick Lamar, you probably think like the Drake, diss and all the diss stuff he does. He's really well known for diss tracks. He's really well known for who he doesn't like and letting it be known. And Brand New, Taking Back Sunday, 2 bands that just went at it in the early 2000s. Each band basically has a whole CD. That's probably like the CD that got both of them popular. And the CDs are both full of diss tracks. That's all they are. Both bands had a band member that were into the same girl. Maybe they were more than into the same girl, or maybe they actually were, physically into the same girl, if you know what I mean. And now they hate each other. Well, I actually think today they don't hate each other because it's like 20 some years later. But they did really, really badly. And there's all kinds of music just about how much they hate each other. And if you can't associate that with something like Kendrick Lamar in your diss tracks, then I'm not really sure, who you should be associating with him. Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. When I first heard Kendrick Lamar, listened to his music initially, I just heard a few random songs and I didn't get it. I actually thought it wasn't good. And I was like, this is weird. This is strange. And then I actually dove in and listened and I was like, wow, this is super sophisticated. This is super complicated. There's tons of thought to this. The lyrics, the music, the whole, everything about it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into this, way more than I initially thought. And Frank Zappa and the Mothers, I mean, this guy was just a musical genius. He was, I guess, avant-garde is the way to describe it. He took every genre of music, instruments you didn't think even went together. And man, he just threw everything together. He did rock and roll, he did R&B, he did funk, he did orchestral type stuff with his music and also outside of his own personal band. And he's just like Kendrick. And I think that if you just listen to a song randomly, you don't have the context, you're gonna be like, what is this? But if you really listen and you listen closely, man, sophistication, before his time, things that people wouldn't think most commercial music, it wasn't really commercial music he was doing, but, could have, he was successful. He was super successful. So just the avant-garde nature, the going out there and doing what he wants, the being unique. There's something about Frank Zappa. I mean, the Deep Purple song, Smoke on the Water, probably one of the most iconic iconic rock songs ever, Smoke on the Water. It talks about in Smoke on the Water, Frank Zappa and the Mothers had the best place around. It's a lyric in the song. So yeah, you're going to have lyrics and songs in the future about how Kendrick Lamar is the best. You got lyrics in Deep Purple about how Frank Zappa was the best. Bad Religion, punk rock band. And if you're thinking about, a message to get out there in the world, anti-establishment, I feel like rap and punk rock are super close in that regard. So, Kendrick is going to be considered, he is considered one of the greatest. He's going to be considered one of the greatest of his time, of his generation. Bad Religion. You got bands like, the early bands of punk rock, like the Sex Pistols, whatever. Bad Religion is, for as far as I'm concerned, all intents and purposes, American punk rock, the leading band. You got Fat Mike and NoFX, also owns a punk rock label. They're his favorite band. So if they're Fat Mike's favorite band, then they're probably the best. And if you want to have an anti-establishment, we do what we want, we're going to have our message out there and people are going to hear it and we don't care. I mean, that's Bad Religion. The guys are awesome. They initially today, if you maybe see them up there, who are these old dudes? They rock so hard and they have the coolest messages, the best messages. Check out Bad Religion. Incubus. This band is, really had their heydays in the 2000s. They're a rock band, but they mix hip hop and some scratching and stuff. It's not really the music itself and the sound of it and the tone that make me think it's Incubus. It has to do, again, with, I mentioned the sophistication of Kendrick Lamar. You hear his songs on the radio, he's so popular, but I don't think the average person understands how sophisticated his stuff is. And Incubus, not all of it, but a lot of it is a lot more sophisticated, I think, than it initially leads on, whether it's the lyrics or really, in this case, I am talking about the music. Their guitar player, Mike, I think he went to school to get like his PhD in jazz theory or something. I mean, the guy was using like hollow body, jazz guitars and a metal band, a quote unquote metal band, back in the day, the kind of the first one I think to really pioneer that. And there's just something about, blending different styles of music, being super thoughtful with your lyrics, being super thoughtful with the music choices, even though you're in a heavier rock band that's on the radio, that I think is cool about Incubus. And just some of their, smarter, more eclectic things they do give me the vibe of when Kendrick does some of his, smarter, more eclectic things as well. The last one is the Beatles. So maybe this is the most obvious, and that Kendrick is a legend. He's going to be considered probably the best rapper of, this generation. And the Beatles, arguably the best band of their generation, arguably the best band of all time. Just who doesn't know the Beatles? Who doesn't know Kendrick Lamar these days? They are, maybe the way that he's viewed today, the equivalent from their time. So the Beatles, if you don't know who the Beatles are, I mean, I don't know what to say. I think they are one of the greatest bands of all time. They're not my number one favorite, but they're in the top 5. And they only made music for like 5 or 6 years in terms of like actually putting out albums, if you think about that. The Rolling Stones still put out music. The Beach Boys put out like 29 albums or something like that. The Beatles did like, 10 in like 6 years. I mean, if the Beatles didn't break up, if, John Lennon didn't die, if there was ever these reunion things that came around later, they still would have been the biggest thing ever. And I can't think of Kendrick Lamar and not think what was one of the biggest, if not the biggest things ever, and that was the Beatles.